All right, so we're back. Look at some more unit tests. Last time we got through a big chunk of the back end portions, and we ended kind of talking through what we needed to do with the header component. So things like we have the is logged in that does something very similar to what we're doing on the back end for is or in the API service for that. So we'll have to write a test there, positive and negative. We might be able to just copy those over, and then the triggers and that kind of stuff. And there was a little bit of an order issue. The trigger logout was right after the login, and the handle is down here. So, and then well, the other thing I just noticed is we have register complete, which should have been handle register complete. Is the way we handle register. We have trigger register, handle register to follow the naming convention. So maybe we'll put the handles together and the triggers together, make it a little easier to read and understand. Okay. So we've done the API service, but I do know that we had those two is user login functions that are very similar. Is user login tests that should be very similar. So we'll just copy those tests as we bring it over, and we'll come over to the actual header component. We want that one on the side. So this will be our tests, and that'll be what we're testing. I've got it backwards. So the tests over here and the header component over here. There we go. So it is logged in. It's written a little differently, but it pretty much does the same thing. And it's the first function, except for we're testing a component, not a service, right? I think I talked about that last time. What we've instantiated to test. And it's telling me there is no is user logged in because it's named is logged in. All right, so we now have two tests. So I also added the npm run test coverage just before you guys came on into the project JSON, package JSON, sorry. So I don't have to remember that code coverage every time. So we'll run that, let it rerun the coverage, and we should see our statement coverage, or actually the numbers really shouldn't change because it was showing is logged in has been run. So it's theoretically in its mind, it's been covered, right? So our numbers really shouldn't change. Yep, exactly the same. And that's okay. Okay, so this was white before. We intentionally covered that function. Okay, let's do our little reorder of things over here to make life a little easier. So this should be a handle register to match the naming of the other one. Easy enough to change that up there. And then I'm going to move all the triggers together. So register, log in, log out. Move all that functionality together. So trigger, 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 and then handle, handle. So really what we're going to write here for trigger for these first two should be nearly identical, right? Not worry about the after close because we know it's going to fire the handle login and the handle register functions. So we're going to test those independently and separately. So let's write our test. To open a dialog. I don't really need to test in depth what it's opening and that kind of stuff, just that it's opening something. Okay. So what do we need? Well, we have a dialog open. So let's try a spy on. Component dialog. Open. And we're going to stub, which means it shouldn't fire them. But we're getting this weird message on dialog. It's private. All right. So we remember the private, which means, or we should remember the private from last time, which means we need to use the square bracket notation, the bracket string, to reference it, right? So we look up here in our constructor, our dialog's private, which means we theoretically can't access it from the outside. TypeScript allows us to do that. Kind of cool. if you have questions as we go through, ask, please. Okay, because I know last time I went kind of fast. So right now we got this stub. So it'll run this, but that stub just says, hey, I'm going to run, it's a function. You're going to pass me something. I'm going to do nothing other than treat it as if you ran a function. Now, straight stub, we're probably going to get an error because it's going to take this dialog ref that's passed back. You're passing back undefined the way this is set up right now. And so it can't do it after closed. Right? So what do we need to do then? So let's change that to a return value. I want to return this really cool object that has an after closed function. I don't care what we passed after closed, but what it returns, why are we erroring here? Not assignable to observable unknown what? Let's see, dialog ref is not typed. All right, so it's complaining because of the typing, but it should know since we are spying. But let's go take a look what we did up here. Okay, so we're bringing in MatDialog module with the private MatDialog. We are not providing it a mock dialog. And because of that, we're typed to the actual MatDialog types, which means our spying and snubbing gets a little more challenging. Okay. So let's go look something up. Let's say mock MatDialog Angular unit test. Somebody's done it somewhere along the way. Okay, so what's he doing here? He's got a MatDialog ref open, and then he does an instance body thing, and then he sets up his after close. That looks familiar, right? He's doing it through a service instead of a component, but that's okay. And then he's trying to test it. He's providing MatDialog using a MatDialog stub. So he's created, where's his MatDialog stub? I don't see that anywhere above it. That's what this makes sense, the provider, but I don't see where the stub is coming in. So let's see what this guy did. So he created a dialog spy, a dialog ref spy object that has after close, and look what it's doing. See, remember the of that we used for returning an observable, right? So it should then have this. Oh, sorry, what was my using the wrong key there, and then he sets a component instance, which I don't think we need to worry about because we're not using component instance the way this guy did up here, right? So he did this thing, and I don't know why. Not going to worry about why. You know, he's attaching it to the body because it's in a service. We don't need to do that because we're in a component. But we do need the dialog spy. And so spinning up the modal service, he's setting the dialog spy, spying on the test bed, get MatDialog open, and returning the dialog ref spy object. Wow. Yeah. It's a lot more complicated than I would have written it. So I'm going to look and see if there's another solution just to check. Okay. Let's see. So what do we have here? So he created a MatDialog mock that returns another. This is what I would have expected. Okay. So we're going to copy that class. And then there's the MatDialog using the MatDialog mock. Then we have that mocked, which means we then can work with it down here. Okay. And to me, that's a cleaner solution. So let's come up here and let's see what this means for us. Okay. So we're actually going to create a component. And we don't have of. That's why that's complaining there. And then that's out of order. There we go. So most of that was cleanup. So we created this mat dialog mock. Now we have to use the mat dialog mock, which is the import in the providers. Okay. Really simple. This is a simple, clean solution. We're basically saying, hey, I'm going to be giving you what to use if you're going to implement mat dialog. And so if we have mat dialog there, then we have to actually import it, which just changed it up here. And then we don't need the comments. So what's going to happen here? The mock is passed in when this is utilized in the constructor, when it fires, when it creates this class. Okay. So that when we try and use dialog, this .dialog, it has an open function that returns, doesn't care what's passed in. It returns an object that has after close, and that's how you do the dot notation, chained dot notation. Okay. So it returns that. That gets added into the dialog graph, which has, since it's an object, you have after closed, which is a function, executes as a function, and it returns an observable that we can subscribe to with an action of true, which I don't think we need the action true, but it's not going to hurt anything. Okay. That's really all we need to do. And so down here, we don't need this spy on anymore because we're doing essentially we created our own mock instead of a spy. Okay. So what does that mean now? That means when this runs, the dialog open will trigger. We have this mat dialog mock that gets instantiated, and we should then be able to do it. We should still be able to do. I'm going to undo this because we're just going to spy on it. Just spy on it. Okay, it's a mock, so we should be able to spy on it. And then we want to trigger. So in here, we want to fire the component trigger register. There you go. And we should expect component dialog open to have been called. Shouldn't be any more than that. Now, theoretically, could I check to see that we had subscribed and we had passed something in? Yes, I could do that. But no, we need more than that. Let's run it and see how badly we crash it, right? This is always the exciting part with a new pattern. Oh, we crashed something, not too bad. All right, cannot read properties of undefined reading after closed. So header component type script. Oh, no. Yeah, not read properties of undefined reading after closed. So the dialog ref that passed it back, it has an after closed. So what it's telling me is dialog ref is undefined. That's the one I don't use. So for some reason, what it says is happening is we don't have anything defined. And I could be right. We need to figure out why. And it is. That's the console info. I can't use console log because remember we're stubbing those out. So for some reason, when it runs dialog open, which should be this function, nothing's getting returned. That seems strange. right, let's try this a slightly different way. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to leave the export class. I'm going to comment that out for now. What I do is I need something like I'm going to create a const mat dialog mock. Now create it a little more directly. I create it as an object. And this object has an open function. And it returns an object with after closed. Looks familiar, right? But there's nothing to instantiate. So sometimes that instantiation gets a little weird. And I want to make sure we're not having problems with that. Missing a comma there. Semicolon there. Unreachable. Well, that's different. We got a different error. And so what's unreachable? Okay, so header component. Trying to see where expected undefined to be truthy. So it never got to the first of our tests, which would be this one. So that mock mat dialog mock clearly isn't working. Oh, because that was use class. Let's try use value. Hey, there we go. But it's still returning undefined, right? So when it opens, when we do the dialog open, it's saying it's undefined. So what does this dot dialog look like? Oh, I want that there. We'll put that inside the console, right? And if you guys have thoughts on this, please jump in. And while that's running, let's go over here real quick because this wasn't the bottom answer. So let's go take a look, see if anybody's got another route. All right. Look at the inject part. So he's describing a test. He has dialog mat dialog. So he does a mock dialog ref that has close. So he's providing mat dialog ref with the mock. Interesting. But that would be for an open component, not. That's the dialog component. That's the wrong end of what we're trying to test. Because we're not actually in our code, we're not using mat dialog ref. So I'm looking at that going, we're only using mat dialog. It's mat dialog that we need to test. And see, we can see here, this is an object with an open that's a function. And when open is triggered, which should be this one, it should receive register modal component, which I could care less what it receives. And it should return an object that contains after closed so that this can fire. But we're getting undefined here, which doesn't make sense to me. So these are mocking the wrong things. Okay, so that we didn't find the answer we needed there. I have this somewhere else. Okay. I need to switch over keyboard. Be right back. Um, Back. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. So hold on, I'm actually in the wrong repository. So hang on one second. Let me get the right one open. And I need to see someplace where I'm opening a modal. Yep, dashboard events should do it. Not the API service. Let's go look at this back. So what do we have in here? We have an HTTP block, router mock. We're providing. No, it's not in there. Let's look at the route spy. There it is. Mock dialog. That's weird. Okay, mock dialog open. Not worried about route spies. Active route. We have mock dialog open. Interesting. All right. So I am bringing in the mat dialog module, just like we are over here. Looking at the test suite. There. But I am not mocking in the current pattern I'm using. I'm not handling it that way. So where am I using then this mock open? Fine. How am I using that? It's used 5 times. So we're spying on the open and returning the mock. That's different. Okay. So let's go to the definition of that. Okay. It's different. All right, so we're gonna get rid of this. And so what we have is mock. What I called it was mock dialog open. And then I'm actually returning after the open, the after closed. And after closed, runs a function that just returns an object, and that object has subscribed. Jeez, there we go. And this is a really fancy function here. It returns an empty object. As complicated as it got. And then what do we have here? So this should be, what's that complaining about there? There's, oh, identifier expected. So what did we do? This is the, wait, that's the squiggle. That's the rounded. Oh, that's a, oh, geez, I hit the wrong button. Hang on. Oh, you guys all came back. Like everything on every screen disappeared. There we go. That was a period, not a comma. So now what we do is we get rid of this. Apparently I've fought with this before because this is actually a really simple solution. And then we return value on open the mock dialog open. Is that right? So component dialog open, oh, and return value. Yeah. So it's just going to return that mock. And what are we complaining about here? Mock dialog open, argument type after close, subscribe to is not assignable to parameter mat dialog ref. So what's different there then? But that's allowing it here, but not there. So let me check one thing. So, see? So dialog is map dialog in my code. Then come on. So then dialog constant dialog ref equals this dialog ref open. Argument of type after closed subscribe. It's not assignable parameter unknown. Missing the following properties. Ref container instance component instance stable close. Wow. I'm wondering if it assumes something from over here. Because that seems really weird that it would be that particular. This is the same test. I'm doing it the exact same way. Spy on component dialog open and return value. And I'm getting a different TypeScript error. I'm not getting a TypeScript error over there. Wonder if I can do scanning. There we go. So I'm basically telling TypeScript, forget about it. We can do the explicit so it doesn't do, oops. There we go. So it doesn't complain about that any. That should give us a running test. This is like 2 generations past my work code at the moment. And I'm looking at for that. Wow, that's different. It succeeded. It was, oh, because we have a couple console warnings, I'll bet. That's where that, I'll bet that's where it's coming from. That's the info. So our console.infos are what are providing that wonderful chunk for us there, but the test did pass, right? So we spied on the dialog open. We returned a mock dialog open that handles this after close. So that it allows it to get past that code without complaint. There we go. So now when we come back over here and we look at our code coverage report, hey, we're a little further along. Finally. Questions? Comments, concerns? All right. Okay, so we got trigger register done. Trigger login is going to be really easy to do now, right? We'll take this, that, we're checking on the open, we're mocking it the same way. It's the trigger register open, and we want to make sure the dialog open was called. We're at 81.48% now. Yay. Us. Yeah. I have to do a little more for the logout because it's a little different, but not much different. Okay, so we're at 82. We're jumping up. 31 successful tests. So here, first thing I notice as I look at trigger logout is we've got to wait. Right? To send logout and apply API logged in user value. That sounds good enough. Oops. There we go. So That's what we're gonna do. But we don't have to do much more than that. Then why is it complaining about send log out? Oh, it's changed. That's weird. Component API is going to be private. All we do is stub it. We're just going to check to see that it fired, right? Now, async, because this is asynchronous, right? And we also need to set a value to the API. So component square bracket API dot logged in user equals that. And so let's make sure we're logged in, right? So we know initially we're setting up our initial state. We know we're logged in. We're setting up the API so that when it runs that line 34, that our logged in user on our component matches what's in the API service. We're simulating, right? So then we trigger this. And we should expect component API service dot send logout. We've been called. That's simple. Did it call it, right? Remember, we're isolating. So then the other piece we have to check is expect that component dot logged in user that was username Bob to equal an empty object. See how that tests that a logout occurs correctly? Cool. Let's run it. Let's see if we get somewhere above 83%. We're creeping up, right? Oh, we broke something. Oh, I know we broke. Got to await, right? So my expect is send logout method doesn't exist. Send logout method doesn't exist.
It's .api, I think, right?
No, this is, it's a little different. It's, yeah, the square bracket API is the same as .api. But it's telling me send logout doesn't exist, which means something, we may have something mocked wrong. So first of all, these grays can go. So our mock header API service. So let's go to the definition of that. Send logout. It has a send logout. Yep. And use class, I think. Let's try that. Adjust that a little bit, see what happens there. That fixed it. Okay. So what I noticed is, first of all, this is a class. So we have to use the use class so that it knows to instantiate it. Right. If we use an object, it would actually be trying to use the class uninstantiated, which would be why we get an error saying that send logout doesn't exist, right? Because it hasn't been newed up. Now that it's been newed up, it's able to get that. Now that we're awaiting, these expects happen after the await gets properly cleared. Our function, as we spied on it, it just stopped it. So it just lets it pass right through. Okay. So we've finished is logged in, trigger, trigger, and trigger. And we have two handles to write, and we've got this whole section done. Right. By now you should be guessing what I might be typing here, right? So handle register has three possible things that can happen. First one is results undefined. Second one is result has status is false. So these are both, they clicked outside the modal or they clicked cancel on the modal. Those are going to be easier to write if I already know what the send registration API catch looks like. Okay. So we're going to expect this to send registration. Okay. And to send a registration, we need some dummy data, right? So we need a result. Any equals, and it's going to have username, password, and email now, right? I don't care what they are. This is dummy data. I just have to get it past those first two if blocks, right? We also need to spy on the component square bracket API send registration. And we're going to stub it. It should be all we need to do. Oh, this is async. So then when we trigger it, we have to make sure we await it. Right? And we'll register. Oh, we have to pass a result. And expect that component API .apu, there we go, send registration and registration to be to have been called. Now we could say to have been called with username, password, email, but to have been called is enough, I think, in this case. I mean, it's going to pass through what data we give it, right? So that should work. Fingers crossed, right? So as this runs, then we'll need to check the other two branches. And we'll show you what happens when we look at the code on branching, okay? Never reached this, if path not taken, if path not taken. So that tells me I've got two branches there that haven't been covered. Okay. That's kind of one of the important distinguishers there. Our branch numbers are really low because nothing we've done in here prior to this has any branches. This one has 3 branches. This one has 3 branches. The 2 ifs and passing through the ifs, right? So now we can basically take this and kind of clean it up a little bit. This is really easy. So in this case, we're going to handle click outside modal, which the click outside modal is undefined. So result is undefined. That's that first if block. Okay. We still spy on the registration. We still trigger it. And we expect the send registration not to have been called. That was easy to write. Oh. And amazingly, status false. Pretty easy to write. The handle, modal, cancel. And if we really want to be correct, we probably should put in status through here. It's not going to make any difference because we're not looking for true. We're looking for false, right? But that should cover all 3 branches, assuming I saved the files and all of that. Starting to make a little bit of sense? You guys sound so positive. Look at that, our branches are finally in the yellow. It's no longer red, 57%. Okay, and this 88 would be enough to get you through if you needed to. Okay, we're jumping up. Our handle login complete ought to be a little bit easier than what we just wrote, but we still need 3 of them. Okay, so it expects handle login complete to apply the login user. So the mocking here is really simple compared to what we had before, right? So this is a login. So our component logged in user would be empty at this point, right? And so we need a result similar to what we did before. So let's give it this result. Because results only gonna have a status, so we'll give it that result, but we'll strip all the other stuff off. So that's all we need on that. Okay, and then our component API equals username. And yes, I'm using Bob here. You can put anything you want inside there, it doesn't matter. Okay. So then this is async. I need to fix our async. And then we need to await component handle login complete and pass it result. Oh. And I expect we can write our false statements here to handle quick outside modal, which means this is undefined. Oh, we didn't put an expect in here, so let's write that. Well, component dot logged in user to equal username. Now here the expect is going to be slightly different. This is going to be, it should be the same. Shouldn't change it, right? We should bail out early. And then the other state we have is when they hit the cancel. Which is where our status is false. In which case, everything else below it's the same, right? Writing unit tests is not necessarily the most exciting code. It's probably the most important code, but it's not the most exciting. Hey, we are all green. And we should see this have changed. Look at that, all green, 100% across the board. Come back here, do a refresh. Look at that, all green. Come back here, do a refresh. Now we're down to homepage, login modal, register modal. Okay.
Yay.
Yay, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so let's go back to here. Okay, unit tests. And here we've got the primarily the header unit test for the header. Let's merge that up to our along with our branch. And just a little more to write. Now we got 9 minutes left, and I'm not going to beat you up with that. Okay, you've seen me write enough tests. Let's take a quick peek at home and login modal and talk about anything weird that might come up. If we have weird, we can come back on the next session. Okay. Service is covered. Okay, good. Home component. We just have to check this trigger details, which console logs. Okay, that should be really easy, right? Right. We've already tested something, the console logs on the errors on our API service. Our login modal. What I'll do is, if these are pretty straightforward, I'll take care of it offline. Okay. Valid entries. Well, apparently we checked user length somewhere along the line. My guess would be we haven't written any tests for this, that this is hitting valid entries with the username in its default state, which actually doesn't make any sense because it wouldn't be greater than 0. So maybe we've got something weird going on there. I don't know. I'll check that one out. The on login. Okay, so success is based on it fires an API. Well, what are we going to do there? We're going to do an of. We're going to return an of that passes in an object. Okay, that object, or in this case, we're going to pass a Boolean back, true or false. And login error, if it's true, we have an error. If it's false, if it's true, we have an error. If it's false, or actually, no, if it's true, we have no errors the way I think we intended it. If it's false, we have an error. We haven't written any handling for login fails. So this one probably needs a little work before we complete it, but I think it's okay at the moment to leave it kind of as is. And then I'm going to stub. I'm going to do a spy on and stub on the close so it doesn't actually fire the close. What I need to do for close and cancel is I need to spy on the dialog ref close just to see what's passed to it. That's easy enough to check. Okay. And then our register modal is going to be nearly identical, I would guess. We've got this on close that sets up some data based on what's in here. So I'm going to put some values into username, email, and password 1, and see that it's passed state with all the data. And this one will be identical to the way the other one is. Does that make sense? You can see how in like 15 minutes, I could have this all wrapped up and ready to push up, ready for you guys to see and merge and talk about. I also want you to see these charts and this kind of stuff. This is how I ensure I got proper test coverage. Because we should be at 100% across the board whenever possible. Now, having said that, be aware if you're using an older legacy set of test suites, which is possible, you may not get to 100%. Especially if you've got something that integrates with something else. The very first heavy round of doing unit testing I was doing, it was this type of reporting, but I was really stopped at around 93% because I had this huge set of code that had to integrate with the main system. And it's those integration points that are nearly impossible to test because we've got all this asynchronous activity going on back and forth, and there's this edge of my code that is a nightmare to test without running some really unusual stuff. Does that make sense? Well, Anne's coming to say hi. She's not recorded, so she doesn't have much. Oh no. Come here. Okay, come here. Which dog?
This one.
Okay. I see it. It's red. There you go.
Say hi to the baby.
Hang on. Oh,
Hi.
hang on. Put it up next to you. Say hi.
Hi.
They're all waving to you, Ian.
How are you? You good?
Find Mama. Now, Mommy, kiss the dog, okay? Love you, baby girl. All right. There's the fun part of the night.
Yeah.
So tests are important. They're not there. You can see that setting those patterns up the first time can sometimes be difficult. And, I think Katie described it best that first time we were going through. Some parts of it are whack-a-mole. Some parts of it are, I know over here, I've got it working in somewhere in the 80 or 90 repositories that I've worked with. I've got it working somewhere. Okay. Or I've written an article on it, the one where yeah, this one, the mock dialogue open might be worth my writing an article about, so that at some point down the road when I'm going, what the heck did I do with that dialogue on the side where I open it in Angular, and have a couple of chunks of code to point me in the right direction really fast. And the fun part is when you write enough of those articles, and at some point down the road, you're a year or two down the road, you're going, how do I solve this? And you go search, and it's like, oh, look, there's my article. It's the first one. I've had times where I clicked on it before I even realized it was my article. I'm like halfway through reading it going, this sounds really familiar. Okay. Those articles are great references for your trials and tribulations as you go through all this. Any questions up to this point? Any comments or concerns? Dylan, I saw you picked up the back end one. You comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think it's I basically have the a login registration system on the branch. We just need yeah, it's 27.
You okay with trying to wire that to the new database?
Yeah, I can try that.
Okay. If you have trouble with it, let me know. Pretty sure I logged in using my Google, so it won't be something I can just hand off my username and password to right away, but we can figure that out if we need to too. Okay. But it should be I'm hoping it's like super straightforward.
Yeah, I hope so.
I don't know.
But
And probably a whole lot easier in the long run than people having to install it on their machines, as long as they have the right token. They should be okay. Now, one of the things I can show this. Yeah. One of the things is, once you create a password, you can't get back to it. I remember where, somewhere in here, it was like, hey, go here to see the password kind of stuff. But it didn't connect. Yeah, see, it hides the passwords by default. So if you don't copy the password once you create the password, you can't get back to it. Okay. So the stuff that I gave you guys offline has the actual username, password, and all of that. Okay. And if we generate a new one, we get stuff. And connection details, view documents, blah, blah, blah. So we have the username, view the password, and it gives us all the environment app, terminal, and I'm hoping I didn't just open up the one. It's not supposed to show the password. And look at this over here. Make sure they're not the same. No, that's not the same. Okay. So whatever I just generated here, I'm going to delete this. Okay. So yeah, here, passwords can't be displayed after initial creation. So if we start shifting people around or something like that, I can always go back and clear those passwords. I'm not sure where. Yeah, passwords. Here we go. So this is the one I just created. That's probably the older one. There should have been one. Yeah. Oh, this is the one from earlier. Okay. Should have been another one in here. So if that one doesn't work, let me know. This one I created a minute ago. We don't need. There should have been another one in here. That's going to bug me now. Because I created one. If that doesn't work, let me know, because it's possible. I created one that was called development. It's not the username for it. And I don't see it here. This 4 hours ago, I think, was when I spun up the original database. And I don't even have that password. I didn't copy it down. I created another admin password that I don't see here. Damn, let me try and rebuild it and see what it does. It's on branch main. It has role admin, generate password. See, it shouldn't have been able to generate it, and it did. So let me copy everything back over to, I gotta do this off screen, guys. I'm gonna copy to that file and I'll re-upload the file. So there's the general. I need the, come on. I'm trying to do this and not show it to you guys at the same time. This is challenging. All right, so connection strings for that. So here's the, that's what I need. Put that here. And then the connection using the dot environment should be the same. I'm giving you the general just in case we run into any issues on it. Okay. So I'm going to save that. That's the hidden file, and I'm going to upload that hidden file back to you guys. So I can bring it back over to here. There we go. Don't need that at the moment. And then close this, and then there's development. There. So that's what you should have been able to see. Was development. I don't know where that went to. It was there. Maybe I'm only allowed to have 2 passwords. I don't know. So then I need to re-upload that file. My computer should be at the same place. There it is. So the second one is the right set of notes. The one uploaded at 7:03. Okay. I think I could add somebody in as an administrator, but I don't. I don't know how all this works. Okay. I mean, this has branching and things like that that I've never worked with the database before. So new stuff for all of us. So maybe this will be one we poke at some point down the road too. You can see it's the Chess Genius project, which we have a whole lot going on, right? Looks like some weird queries have happened somewhere along the way. Organization name. Members. I can add members. Okay, who do we need to add? Dylan for starters, right?
Yeah. Is it by email?
I think so.
Okay, I'll type mine in chat.
Where's this stuff? So if you want on this one, give me your email. Whoa, that wasn't what I copied. I'm going to send the connection string. All right, so invitation has been sent to you, and invite, accept, send. Anybody else? Jack, Federico. So this was. So invitations are out. And
I just typed in my email.
got it. See it. I don't think you need to have the access to. Oh, copyright. I don't think you need the access to be able to use it for the development work we're doing. But I don't think it hurts to get to know the system a little bit. Invited,
Okay.
invited. So I've got 4 invitations out. So once I get invitations accepted and we see members, I think that's when I can change. Yeah, so Dylan, you're a member. Good. That's what I wanted to see, whether you were members or administrators or that kind of stuff. If we need to bump access, like I'll probably don't bump Dylan's up to administrator since he's working on that back end part. So if he needs to jump in and see anything, the other side of accepting this is you have better access to look at what's going on and see their documentation too. Does that make sense? So,
Yep.
So that's working. This puts us into that database. And, we don't have a production branch. I'm not worried about that at this point. We don't have any tables. We have one branch. We don't have backups. We don't have deployment requests, but, tons of good stuff in here on learning how all this works with PlanetScale.
I do have a concern about our user model so far. Yeah, I was wondering if we're going to store the JWT in the user.
In the
or not.
database?
Yeah,
Probably.
so
that's the easiest way to check it when it comes back when you have multiple users, right?
no, so I've been doing research and apparently so JWT you can check just like the signature on the
Yeah.
token, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
how it checks. So we don't need to store it on the user if we don't want to. The only downside of JWTs is that we can't manually expire them
Right.
on logout. But if we wanted to, we could have like a blacklist of tokens that we check against. I don't know if that's worth it or not, though. So for instance, if we wanted to log out a user using a JWT, we could store the JWT token on a blacklist and then check it if we're authenticating them. But I'm not sure if that's worth calling the database for that.
I mean, you're calling the database either way, right? And your blacklisted set of JWTs will get longer and longer and longer. Whereas if we put a jot in on the individual user's account when they're logged in, you only have one per user max. And then you delete it out on logout.
Yeah, we could do that, but we don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't have to. So we can just check the JWT without hitting this the database at all.
Right.
We can just do it on the back end.
I'm going to trust you on it, whichever way you want to go with it.
Okay, I mean, I could go either way, but just wondering.
I mean, you guys have been messing with that side of it more than I have recently. I've got a meeting Friday afternoon with somebody from Auth 0 from Okta. I don't know if that's going to be too expensive for me. Leaked secret has been revoked. Well, that's interesting. So that would be why that one username disappeared. Detected a public repository in GitHub. Well, that's wait. The only time I pushed was in that branch. In the history, what did we push up? Oh, you little butt! I should not have pushed that. That's why I got revoked. The backend environment file should never have been pushed. That was on. I'm positive that was on. Hang on, let me check. We should have a git ignore. And that's the one that has the hide. And then we should have a git ignore in the backend. We don't have a git ignore.
Oh, apparently we did, yeah. Yeah, I think I had to create one the other day because I was looking for one.
And since the file exists, it's gonna, man. One of the ones I found is if when you create the file, that's when it checks the git ignore. And sometimes changing it to old and back again will force it back into that ignored state. But it's not. Let's see, that file should never have been pushed. They're right. That's the old username password that got deleted. So why am I not? All right, I'm gonna just delete that for right now. What am I going to do with that file? I am going to. I still want the pattern there. I need the API port one. Well, you're creating, well, no, it doesn't matter if you create a new one. We have to have it in our local environment. So I'm going to open this in Finder. I'm going to move that stupid file to my desktop. Then I'm going to do the git commit on it. Because I'm deleting the environment and patching the git ignore. I thought I could have sworn it was in the parent to handle that. Nope, it is not. So that was purely my mistake. 100%. All right. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we're going to update this git ignore. That way. So now I should have the backend. So that should be the parent git ignore. This should be the file getting deleted. You know, I'm not even going to worry about getting it production ready yet. Okay. Right, so that should push it up without the .env file, and so then my desktop version of it. There we go. Oh, not on my desktop. Hey, no, I put it on my desktop. Huh, where'd it go? All right, well, let's come over here and go to desktop. It's not on my desktop. Where'd I put it? My recent's all screwed up, so I can't look in there. So it's not, it's gone. My .env is completely gone. Oh well, I can recreate it. Let's do that. Let's go into backend. I'm going to create a new file. .env. And that should be grayed out by default, and is not graying it out. Why not? Because of git ignore. It's clearing node modules. So what are we looking at for node modules? So the slash after it, and that says it's a folder. I wonder if I need to clear credit. So long. Oh, wrong one. Clear. Oh, that's not what I want. Okay, so git file git ignore, not ignore. There's usually some cached little query thing you have to do. So everything in dist in him should have been, right? So the files were in before git. Yeah. Git rm cached. All right, so then what we need to do is, oh, wrong one. Where did my, there's VS Code go? Wrong one. Don't need to see that one. Where did my VS Code go? There it is. Man. So we need to delete that file. Then I need to paste that in. What? I don't want to remove anything. Okay, so looks like I need to do the specific folder. I'm in front end. It's still showing it. So basically, I just pulled everything out of should have pulled everything out of the cap, although it did not pick up the .env file.
There is the worst, or this problem.
Yeah, and now that I've also worked up my caching. No, I'm not worried about any of that. Uncommitted changes. No changes to commit. They tell me those aren't changed, which they're right. So that was the get ahead. And there's nothing to push because where it is. So that theoretically should have cleared that folder. And the .env, which we're going to say, oh, I should, yeah. It was what, port? Something like that. I don't really even care what's in it. Just want to get something in there so that I can click out here and look at it and say, that should have been ignored. So I'm going to step this up and say, get ignore is not ignoring my .env file.
I don't see it on the branch right now if you pushed it up, but
Well, no, I deleted the file,
okay.
but it should be showing grayed out right there, like node modules, saying that it's not going to be tracked. So since it's not grayed out, what's going to happen is it's going to show up over here as a file to be pushed up. And wait, it's not. Wait a minute. Well, that's odd. Huh. All right, so what was the port thing? It says it's not there to be pushed. Dot environment. Port, API port, that's what it was. So that's actually changed. And where my concern was that it had been showing up here and now it's not. So it's ignoring it, even though it's showing that it's not ignoring it in VS Code. So we probably then, let's do this. Reopen VS Code, we'll quit it completely. I do notice VS Code sometimes gets those out of sync. And if you click off, notice nothing showing yet. There we go. Just had to restart VS Code.
Oh,
All right, so I then can put my hidden information into that without you guys seeing. So I have the database URL. There were some notes when you get to that stuff on for you, Dylan, on whitelisting. And I didn't read it in depth. So we might have to whitelist where we're coming from.
Gotcha.
Don't know how detailed that's going to be, if it's going to fight us on that or not. I haven't worked with that service before, so I don't know anything about them other than they seem to have really solid setup for MySQL. Some really cool stuff that could take a lot of weight off of us as devs. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so I've probably taken up enough of everybody's time tonight, right? Oh, email secrets leaked. Well, I don't have another one of those. So that's good. That was pretty cool, though, that it saw that fast. That was impressive. Very, very quick. No, these notes that I put in here are just notes. I trust you to go the route you think is right. Okay. None of this is set in stone. Whatever you think is best on this, let's go that route.
Yeah, much of those notes were notes I put in there, and they were just a starting point because I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I should get it pushed up. Well, after do the database migration to what's it called? The planet scale. Yeah.
And if the planet scale fights you too much, we can do it for now. We'll make another card for integrating with planet scale. Okay. I don't know how hard or easy that's going to be. You know, as big and as solid as they seem to be, it should be fairly straightforward. Oh, there we go. There's how you get to use the documentation. And, you know, we've got support and that kind of stuff too. So use it if need be. Cool.
Yep.
All right, let me stop the record.